It's great to have you with us. Winter weather kicked into high gear across the country, and we have a lot to unpack with you over the next hour. We're going to be talking about the weather storylines in British Columbia, some wind warnings and problematic snow, extreme cold in parts of the prairies, and for Ontario, Quebec, and Atlantic Canada, a messy system moving through. And that's why we have on hand our experts to help guide you through, meteorologist Tyler Hamilton and storm hunter Mark Robinson. So we'll be walking through a lot to cover here, and Mark's out in Cambridge tracking some of this weather. And Tyler, there's certainly a lot to keep track of in parts of Ontario and into Quebec.
Yeah, for sure. Mark, we've noticed a transition over to rain where you are, and this is the latest satellite imagery and radar. Notice that pink hue there shifting north of the 407. Orangeville and the Dundalk Highlands are holding on to that wet snow. The Greater Toronto area now seeing those wet road conditions. So we have a high resolution product here, really deciphering what your drive this evening will entail. There's the heavy snow on a line from Orangeville, Barrie, over towards the Haliburton Highlands, but the drive will be quite slippery still as our temperatures are pretty slow to nudge above the freezing mark. Now let's go to Mark here in the field and just get an update of what the conditions have been over the past little bit. Mark, you look freezing, to be honest, just freezing.
Well, oh, you know what? It's actually not that bad. It was actually colder earlier, but I'm standing here in the rain. I wanted to sort of start off, let everybody know what we're going to be doing, because you're not going to see me that often in front of the camera, because that is the 401 at Cambridge. Now, don't worry, I'm well off the road. I'm actually at the en route, but I'm going to be driving along the 401 to try and show you what the conditions are like. And I can tell you, it's very, very changeable. When I was in Cambridge this morning, we went from snow to ice pellets to rain, back to ice pellets, and then I drove up here to the en route on the 401, sort of between Cambridge and Guelph, and we're back to rain. Like, went snow, and then we're back to solid rain. So what I want to try and do is just show you the conditions, what you might be driving in as we get towards that evening rush hour, because the one word that I got to use for this system is messy. Very, very messy system, and unfortunately, a lot of people are going to be out and about in it. So I'm going to jump back in the car, warm up, and maybe dry off just a little bit.
All right, thank you so much for that update, Mark. And let's check in with Matt Hamels, who is also tracking this type of a setup. This is kind of an appetizer for the week ahead. Matt, we've got a lot of cold air being dumped across Western Canada. That is going to really fuel an active storm track, and it really is the week of the Texas low across Ontario, Quebec, and Atlantic Canada.
Yeah, no, absolutely, Tyler. This Texas low wreaking havoc in such a large portion of the United States and now here into Canada. So there's a look at what we're working with right now. It's quite a large area, seeing really that mixture of precipitation, right? And like Mark was highlighting, it's just messy. Started out as snow for many and then pivoting to rain. In fact, many areas are currently under rainfall warning. So the back end of the storm will be quite wet, pooling of water on roads, and we'll ultimately see this shift over into Atlantic Canada. So that's going to really be starting late tonight, more so early on our morning tomorrow for our Wednesday. And the big concern in parts of Atlantic Canada, starting in the Maritimes tomorrow, are going to be some triple-digit wind gusts really ramping up. And of course, there's a lot going on in other parts of the country as well. It's not just an Eastern Canada story. We have quite a bit to talk about in the West, Tyler, but we're certainly devoting a lot of attention to this ongoing story in parts of Ontario, Quebec, and ultimately Atlantic Canada.
Yeah, exactly, Matt. This is going to be a jam-packed hour, because we could fill it just looking at the precipitation type forecast across Eastern Ontario and Southern Quebec. This is our highest populated region, really, that is going to be dealing with adverse weather. So I'm going to walk you through the timing of this precipitation hour by hour. So here's this afternoon, 4, 5, 6 p.m. Heavy bands of snow are really going to sit into the Ottawa Valley, Petawawa, Renfrew, but that band of heavy snow will park itself over the city of Ottawa. Montreal, we'll get to you in just a second, but because this is going to be a highly impactful storm up and down the St. Lawrence Seaway as well. And to make matters worse, computer models are now projecting this wintry mix to enter the equation. Note that pink hue just south of Ottawa. That's where we're tracking the risk of ice pellets and freezing rain Tuesday evening and overnight. Eventually, we're forecasting Ottawa to transition over to straight rain by the time we head through the pre-dawn hours of Wednesday. We'll have to keep an eye on that temperature closely. Montreal as well, expected to transition over to rain, but the damage will have been done there. So that is a look at our precipitation update across eastern Ontario. We'll get to southern Quebec in just a second. Now, Matt, we've had a lot of active weather out towards British Columbia as well. I was checking in on some of the power outage numbers there. We were reporting numbers, and in fact, over 10,000 for southern Vancouver Island. So as you said, it's not just an Ontario story, it's a Western Canada story.
Yeah, in a moment, we'll get to some more questions, Tyler. I know that we have a lot to talk about in British Columbia, but if you're watching at home and you have a question about weather details specific to your area, let us know. So, Tyler, if we could just loop back to Ontario for one more quick moment. We do have a question that appeared in our live stream chat. How much snow is falling in Mississauga? Now, Tyler, I know we're kind of in that process of pivoting over to rain, but could you help shine a light on maybe this question specific to snowfall in Mississauga?
Yeah, what you've seen so far, Matt, in Mississauga, that's all you're going to get. This storm is getting warmer and warmer. So I noticed down along Lakeshore, you really only accumulated a centimeter or two. So as you moved north out towards Brampton, you probably didn't get much more than about 5 centimeters out of this system. But be patient if you're a snow lover. By the time we get to Friday evening and Saturday, I think you'll be looking at a little more than that.
Okay, Tyler, we'll have more questions coming up. Can we hop over to British Columbia? I want to see, like you mentioned, certainly the wind speeds, the wind warnings for many areas likely diminish into the evening, but still quite a concern through the remainder of our Tuesday for parts of Vancouver Island. We've seen those wind warnings. Now, here's a look at those outages. Again, part and parcel of these very strong winds and in the tens of thousands of outages here, Ty.
Yeah, they've continued to tick up through Tuesday morning, Matt. In fact, our peak gust, 109 kilometers an hour. So this is an exposed section on the Strait of Juan de Fuca there. But downtown Victoria, noticing the Saanich Peninsula, Duncan getting some power outage and further up the Saanich Peninsula, wind gusts to 80 kilometers an hour. Through Metro Vancouver, we haven't noticed too much in the way of major power outages. It's been under 5,000 so far. YVR just gusting to 50 kilometers an hour. This low is forecast to slowly weaken through the interior of BC. And then we're going to really talk about the cold, that Arctic outflow conditions will progress all the way to the coast of BC. But let's check in with our Tuesday afternoon storm hunter. You are in the thick of it, on the drive. Mark Robinson, there it is, really just gross road conditions. We can see a lot of that slush spraying up on the road. If you can give us a little update, it would be much appreciated for those tackling the drive home Tuesday evening.
Yeah, I'm literally just passing underneath Highway 6 north to Guelph right now, and you can see that there's not any snow. We're not really seeing snow packed onto the roads. You can see a little bit of slush off on the side or off on the sort of the exit ramps or the entrance ramps to the 401. The biggest issue I think right now is the big trucks. They sort of really spray, really turn that water on the road into almost like a high spray, the high speed fog. That's your biggest problem at this point. I'm only doing 80 kilometers an hour. You can see people are generally keeping to about the same speed. So definitely people taking it seriously. And, so far so good. I just took a quick look at the traffic potential.
The car in the white, that's a lesson to clear our snow completely off the cars. That's a hazard.
Oh yeah, you know what, I didn't even notice that. Thank you for pointing that out. Yeah, I do see that a lot. I have seen it a couple of times. So yeah, it's not too bad if you are headed out on the roads later on this afternoon, at least along the 401, sort of between Kitchener-Waterloo and the GTA. So far, the journey continues.
All right, drive safe, Mark. We'll continue to check back in on your whereabouts over the next hour. Now let's continue to time out the precipitation through southern Ontario. So this is also going to bring a decent slug of moisture and rainfall. Our computer models are projecting the heaviest rainfall along the shores of Lake Erie and Lake Ontario, and we haven't even gotten to the wind speeds yet. This is a very deep area of low pressure that is situated over Lake Huron Tuesday night into Wednesday. So that is going to create very strong westerly winds in behind the low pressure system. So those of you in and around southern Ontario above the escarpment that's dealt with that changeover to rain Tuesday afternoon, look what happens into Wednesday morning. Temperatures falling once again below the freezing mark, and then we're dealing with a little bit of lake enhancement, so there could be some reduced visibility. So you've gone from a rain event back to a snow event. Essentially, we are going to be dealing with a lot of weather whiplash, Matt, over the next several hours as we continue to track, and days, I should say. But we've got another question into our live stream here.
Yeah, that's right, Tyler. Now, this system, like you mentioned, ultimately kind of pushing out a bit of lingering effects for parts of Ontario, but it's going to make its way into Atlantic Canada. Now, the big story there will be wind, although we are seeing some precipitation there as well, and kind of a similar, familiar storyline there as we see some places start out with snow, transitioning to rain. But we have a question, how much precipitation is Halifax getting? And it's a good question to ask more generally precipitation, because yes, there is a chance of some snow for areas like Halifax, but as you see, for much of Nova Scotia, we are trending on the lighter side for snowfall, more of a rainfall event. We'll talk about those rainfall totals in a moment, but as we take a look at northern sections of New Brunswick, now we're getting into some areas north of Miramichi, 30 centimeters, possibly even more than 30 centimeters in some parts of the region. As you see there, as we do have that heavier snowfall for some areas, many will still see that transition from snow to rain as this event really settles into our Wednesday. This is really picking up late today, moving in. This is going to be the story for our Wednesday. Here's a look at our rainfall in the forecast. So Tyler, when somebody's asking specifically precipitation for Halifax, looks like maybe a bit of both types, likely predominantly rain, but I wonder if you could walk us through that.
Yeah, I'll try to decipher it. You know, Texas lows are so messy. You don't just get one precipitation type with them, Matt. We can notice that the signal for that warm air spreads all the way across the southern maritime provinces. So you could see downtown Halifax is actually looking at very little snowfall in a setup like this. I'm more concerned about the regions across central and northern New Brunswick, which you alluded to, Matt. There it is. That's a heavy rain signal Wednesday afternoon in Halifax. So we have to worry about, you know, some localized pooling and ponding. We'll throw on the rainfall outlook there. Those dark greens are indicating about an inch or 30 millimeters of rainfall. That's a pretty significant amount of rain for the middle of January. But I do want to turn our attention over towards Quebec. I want to focus in on the snowfall amounts in and around the island of Montreal. This forecast has been incredibly difficult to really pinpoint the amount of snow that's forecast to fall in and around downtown Montreal. We're very, very close to that 20 centimeter mark in Montreal. A little bit further south as you work yourself towards the southern island of Montreal, but these are very heavy snowfall rates, and in fact, with the strong winds, as we truck up the St. Lawrence, there is a blizzard officially in our forecast on our apps, on our Weather Network platforms, up towards Quebec City, the higher terrain of Quebec City. This big Texas low has a very strong low-level jet wrapping around the east side of this low pressure system. Look at the eastern townships, Quebec City, right through early Wednesday morning, wind gusts 70 to 90 kilometers an hour. Now, thankfully, the winds are a little bit lower as we look towards Montreal, but this very strong signal for wind actually spreads across Atlantic Canada as well. I'm concerned about power outages in and around Atlantic Canada. So Halifax, when you look at the dominating factors here, you've got the rain, the brief start of snow. Look at these winds roaring off the Atlantic. There will likely be tens of thousands of power outages across Atlantic Canada through the day Wednesday. Look at Yarmouth, Shelburne, southwestern sections of Nova Scotia. You just had to clean up 25 centimeters of snowfall. Pair that with this mess, 30 millimeters of rain. Yikes, Matt. And I think you've got a closer look at our power outage risk across Atlantic Canada, because that is really going to depend on how close you are to the coast.
Yeah, that's right. And you highlighted that risk. We could see a very profound power outage potential as we head into the day tomorrow for the Maritimes. Now, when we look at that high risk of power outage, you see pretty much all of Cape Breton, much of southern Nova Scotia. And like you mentioned, the coastal areas really feeling those strongest winds, as we often do see. And take a look at Prince Edward Island for Charlottetown, a pretty high and widespread power outage risk there as well. But the Maritimes as a whole, I mean, even you get into the bulk of New Brunswick and you still have that moderate power outage risk. So that's something we're going to be watching, and ultimately we'll see some winds shifting over to Newfoundland. We will have a bit of a wind threat there, although it doesn't look like that wind event will be quite as sustained as what we're seeing tomorrow in the Maritimes. Now, ultimately, this system that we're seeing in Ontario and Quebec will make its way into Atlantic Canada. We're going to continue to unpack that, but for now, let's check back in with storm hunter Mark Robinson, who's in southern Ontario, driving around the Cambridge area. Mark, can you give us an update on what you're seeing? Like you mentioned, it's a messy system making for difficult travel here today.
Yeah, I'm driving from Cambridge towards the GTA. We'll see how far I can make it. Just around the Campbellville area, sort of halfway between Guelph and Milton on the 401. You can see ahead of me, everybody's sort of slowing down. And what's really interesting, about the last, I would say, 3 or 4 minutes, I went from like pure rain to almost like a slushy type of rain. So that's, slowed everybody down. And that's so much part and parcel with this system, is that we've got, extreme variability. Snow to rain to ice pellets to slushy rain, back to ice pellets to rain. So it's sort of all over the place. So it's definitely something that you have to take seriously if you're driving, and because we've got a lot of people that are going to be driving home soon, and you're going to be running into these highly changeable conditions. Now, when I was first taking a look at this storm system, I expected that we would be in snow at this point. That I'm up above on top of the escarpment. I expected this to be snow, and once I got down to the bottom, I expected to see that switch over to rain in the afternoon. But I think we've had a little bit more warm air moving in than we sort of originally expected. So we've had that transition over to rain on top of the escarpment. There's only a few areas that are still snow, and those are those highly elevated areas like the Dundalk Highlands, maybe up near Orangeville, north of there, but definitely here on the 401, it's not been too bad. Traffic volume, not bad at all. I've been watching the westbound as well, because that's where a lot of people are going to be headed westbound. You can see the plows are going by, so definitely roads have been treated. Just be a bit careful, because we don't want you to be the reason that all the traffic has to slow down.
Yeah, well, thanks for the update, Mark. We'll check back in with you for more as you continue to really just kind of give us that frontline look of what we're dealing with this system. So traffic moving along okay, but as you can see, Mark and his fellow drivers are taking it slow, and that's certainly, I think, the move for today. Now, here's a look at some of the after effects of this storm, a little bit of lingering snowfall, even all the way into our Thursday. Now, we do have another question, as we'll stick with the Southern Ontario story for just another moment. Tyler, you mentioned that when we're talking about things like a Texas low, the precipitation lines can be very sort of sharp. And for one of our viewers, and we encourage you to ask your questions in our live stream chat, Tyler, somebody's asking, why is there snow falling in downtown Toronto? So could you help explain maybe why that dynamic is set up the way it is?
Well, I've got one graphic, Matt, that is going to really explain and convey why we're dealing with rain in downtown Toronto. Look at the moisture stream all the way originating from the Gulf of Mexico. I can just zoom this out just a little bit more to give the live stream viewers a look at this. It's coming down from the convective activity down towards the southeastern United States, where ongoing tornado warnings and severe weather alerts are ongoing. But this Texas low is very efficient at scooping up this very mild southerly flow. So it's a couple things. We've got the Lake Ontario water temperatures, which are, hovering in the mid-single digits. That's going to moderate the air. But more importantly, when you look at this warm Gulf moisture, that snow in downtown Toronto really today, Matt, didn't stand a chance. And in
questions.
terms of, yeah, go ahead, Matt.
No, Tyler, please go ahead if you have anything else you'd like to add. But here's a look at British Columbia. We've been focusing a lot on Toronto and areas in southern Ontario into Quebec, and for good reason, because that is an ongoing story. But also ongoing is out in British Columbia, where we have not just the wind warnings in parts of coastal British Columbia, where we do have those concerns and the power outages ongoing, but a lot of snowfall still continuing to be an issue, particularly at some of our highway passes. Now you'll see a bit of rainfall on the coast as well. We can talk a bit about that in a moment, but here's a look at those winds, which luckily do start to subside as we head into the evening for western parts of Vancouver Island. Looks like maybe those winds come down a bit earlier for areas more so in towards the Strait. Now, taking a look at that rainfall, we're going to be seeing some modest amounts, 20 to 30 millimeters on that western edge of Vancouver Island, but what's been more disruptive and more sort of, I guess, an indicator of some of the colder temperatures starting to push into areas like British Columbia is the snowfall. And here's a look at our highway passes, and all the way through into our morning tomorrow, we could see snowfall amounts that are quite disruptive. This has been making for some very difficult travel, and Tyler, I think it's still an ongoing event here as our Tuesday rolls along, and it looks like we're still going to have to exercise quite a bit of caution in parts of BC when it comes to this ongoing snowfall.
Yeah, it is incredible in a strong El Nino, Matt, to be dealing with this type of wintry precipitation. So that is a concern, and also a concern for cancellations and flight disruptions. So we've had a question into our stream. Any expectations for flight cancellations in the Montreal area? So Pierre Elliott, Trudeau International Airport. I would say when you look at this precipitation outline across southern Quebec, flight cancellations and delays are guaranteed through this evening. Look at those snowfall rates, for example. This is around that 9, 10, 11 p.m. time frame. These darker blues, right where my mouse is, that is 3 to 5 centimeters per hour. So that is going to be extremely disruptive in terms of dropping the visibility and really slickening up those roads. So those airport crews are going to really have a tough time managing those runways. So by the time we get through Wednesday morning, we're going to flush in some warmer air that'll change this over to a little bit more of rainfall across southern Quebec. And speaking of rainfall, we are going to join Mark Robinson once again in the field, who is driving through really a wintry mix, rain, snow. The precipitation is, oscillating faster than your wiper blades, Mark.
Yeah, absolutely. Right now, though, coming off the escarpment, I'm just coming into Milton and the 401, and you can see this is really where I expected that switch over to rain. So at this point, I'm registering about a 1 degree on the car. The car temperature sensor is not perfect, so it's going to be somewhere around 0 to 1 degree. But you can see there's snow on the sides of the roads, there's snow on the trees. But that's all over where the snow is. The road itself, the 401 itself, here in Milton, not too bad. Very, very wet though. This kind of feels like one of those big fall storms where you get tremendous amounts of rain and everything is just soaking wet because we're just warm enough to melt a lot of that snow. The other half of it is the ground itself. The ground itself has been a bit warmer because of how warm December was for us. So the snow that's hitting the ground now going to melt a bit just because of that little bit of extra warmth that we had in the early winter. But this snow now, this cooling down, is going to cool the ground down, I think, enough to make the snowfall that may occur on the Friday into Saturday of this week in southern Ontario. That's going to be a very different storm, I think, from this one. So that's one I'm watching very closely. But right now, just trying to get through this one. Probably going to go to Mississauga Road and head north there so you get an idea of what some of the smaller side streets are like. But for now, I'm on the 401 just in Milton.
Great, thank you so much. Drive safe, Mark, and that was a perfect segue to talk about the next one. The cat is out of the bag, and it is going to be another Texas low aimed at southern Ontario. So we are not going to catch much of a break. Our break is, the second half of Wednesday, Thursday, because Friday evening and overnight, A low pressure system, potentially with a lower barometric pressure than the one we're experiencing Tuesday and Wednesday, is forecast to track awfully close to the 401. And on the backside of that low pressure system is likely the most prolific lake effect setup of the entire year. The wind speeds associated with that, and also the colder air to work with this next Texas low Friday night into Saturday, means that the GTA will be likely looking at more snow this go around than the system we're currently trudging through over the next several hours. And that is a look at our system in the long range. What is going to really fuel this Texas low and is going to give us, a chance of more snowfall through the GTA, Matt? It starts with a P. We're talking about the polar vortex.
Yes, two of the most exciting words in Canadian weather, the polar vortex, Tyler. And like you mentioned, when we take a look ahead to that next snowy system in parts of Ontario, more dominant colder air, likely a big feature of that. So I'll just kind of step to the side so we can take a look at the polar vortex and some of the frigid temperatures that are being plunged down into Western Canada. But ultimately, Eastern Canada will get in on the fun, or maybe not so fun temperatures, as that polar vortex does send some colder air kind of more dispersed across the country, and Eastern Canada getting its turn. So as of right now, though, that cold air is really having an influence in Western Canada. When we fast forward to Thursday, take a look at some of our temperatures and the departures from normal. So when we have a high of minus 29 in Grand Prairie on Thursday, that's about 19 degrees colder than usual for this time of year. Now, not quite as pronounced of a chill when we take a look at the Eastern Prairies. It's really going to be Alberta and parts of Western Saskatchewan feeling the coldest temperatures. But again, this will really settle in. We're working with a little bit of snow in the lead up to this very profound drop in temperatures here. We'll take a look at how the snowfall is going to spill over into our Wednesday as well, for parts of Manitoba in particular, perhaps even lingering into early Thursday, another pulse of snow in southern Alberta. But this is really the warm-up act, all this snowfall, which again could be quite problematic. You take a look at some of the snowfall totals along the Yellowhead Highway. So we do have some concerns there all the way into tomorrow. And again, some of that heavier snow more widespread in parts of Manitoba, the Parkland region. Shout out to Dauphin. Now, taking a look at our temperatures here again across the country, there's a look at that sort of balancing out with some of that colder air making its way into Eastern Canada. So some concerns there, Tyler. And like you had mentioned, we're going to be seeing that cold air influencing some weather in southern Ontario and for other parts of Ontario as well.
Really remarkable in a strong El Nino, Matt. There is no precedent for such a severe Arctic outbreak across Western Canada during a strong El Nino. So 2024 is off to an unusual start. And you mentioned the temperatures on Thursday. Models are showing across central, southern, northern Alberta on Friday. You want to be sitting down for this one. This could be the coldest high temperatures in 20 years. For the capital, Edmonton, currently in our forecast right now, we have a daytime high of minus 31. That would be the coldest high since January 27th, 2004. The city of Calgary has only featured a daytime high at or below minus 30 a single time in the 21st century. So post 2000, once again, January 27th, 2004, and we are officially forecasting a daytime high, 22, 23 degrees below seasonal for the city of Calgary. So we'll have to continue to monitor this prolific Arctic outbreak. And it's not quite as cold, obviously, across Ontario and Quebec. This is just some of the computer model projections here for the wintry mix. We have high confidence of a lot of that warm air surging up from the Gulf of Mexico, and that stubborn cold air, which is a little bit more deeper in situ across southern Quebec, means this wintry mess will exist all across the island of Montreal. After 10 to 15 centimeters of snow falls, you'll get that transition. So it is an awfully ugly scenario. And then eastern Ontario, this is some great news for the ski season, Matt. You look at Calabogie, and a lot of these ski hills have struggled. This is an absolute gift to get 20 to 25 centimeters of snow across the regions that need it the most.
Well, you talk about this El Nino winter that we've had, and thus far, up until the last few days, it had been really not much of a winter at all, but now really kind of feels like we're ramping up, right? Starting to see that snowfall. We were kind of welcoming that snow for ski hills and parts of British Columbia. Now, again, just to take a look at Ontario, where we do have, yes, most of that snow transitioning to rain in southern areas, still some snow ongoing, but those winds still going to be a factor. Now, I want to take a look at some visuals from Ontario. I think our producer Manny has some queued up. Here's a look at some sped up fast motion snow clearing at Pearson Airport. Now, of course, this is going to be something that's a big concern. Those travel delays earlier, Tyler, you had a look at the Montreal airport and maybe some of the probabilities that we'd be seeing some delays there. So something to factor in, right? Not only maybe factor in some extra time for your drive, but if you do have travel plans, you might want to be checking maybe those flight boards and some of those information bulletins just to make sure that you can get off on time and you're not caught by surprise at some of the things that you might be running into out there. So, Tyler, you highlighted some of that freezing rain, the ice pellets threat, quite nasty. But then when we take a look at the snowfall, of course, Montreal will ultimately see that transition to less snowy precipitation. But when we look over to areas like Quebec City, I mean, it could be pretty well a snowy event for the duration of this Texas low. And again, then when we take a look at Atlantic Canada, we do see precipitation starting to more so factor into our day tomorrow. So here's a look at our radar and satellite of Atlantic Canada right now. Kind of the not a whole lot going on before the storm arrives late tonight. Now, Tyler, if we could just double back to a question that was posed earlier, and we encourage any questions you may have if you're watching this stream, send them our way. We'll do our best to answer, even if you want just a finer point on an area that's specific to you. Tyler, how much precipitation is Halifax getting? That is one of the questions. Could we just circle back and talk a bit more about the Atlantic Canada story we have here?
Of course, Matt. So this is our snowfall projections, and it is very limited in nature, especially along most of the South Shore, HRM region. Now we're looking at just a few centimeters of snow for Halifax because as this system progresses into Wednesday, it is drawing up a significant southerly flow. So there's signals that Halifax may briefly start as wet snow. You won't have to shovel it because it'll essentially literally be washed away through the afternoon and evening, as locally over 30 millimeters of rain are in the forecast. Eventually that heaviest rain will shift towards the Cape Breton Highlands, the North Shore of Nova Scotia, dealing with rainfall, unfortunately, as well for those ski resorts in and around central portions of Nova Scotia. Ski Wentworth, Crab Mountain across New Brunswick will get a lot of snow initially, but then it switches over to that rainfall Wednesday afternoon and evening. And then Newfoundland as well. You're getting in on that snow a little bit later Wednesday evening and overnight, and that warm air doesn't push as far into central Newfoundland. And we've also had a nice localized question. I appreciate all your questions. We do, of course, on the live stream. Highly localized. How much snow is Manitoulin Island expected tonight into tomorrow? Well, we've got Manitoulin Island featured on our northeastern Ontario snow crop. Depends where you reside. So Manitoulin Island, there is that island just south of Elliott Lake. I'll highlight it for our viewers here in the pink. The amounts will really vary depending on which side of the island you reside. So if you're on the eastern side, those purples, you're looking at over 20 centimeters of snow. Further west, closer to Sault Ste. Marie, you're in that 10 to 15 centimeter snow range. So that is kind of the gradient we're looking at. But it is a all snow story for northeastern Ontario, Matt. This is an easy precipitation forecast for Timmins, Sudbury, North Bay. It's just one, it's snow.
Yeah, it's where we're seeing the multiple types of precipitation where it gets kind of tricky, and that's just kind of the rub when you have this Texas low of this nature that's coming through. And again, it's not just wreaking havoc in parts of Canada. I mean, we are seeing some profound weather impacts in parts of the eastern United States as well as a result of this particular low. Now, we have our storm hunter, Mark Robinson, out in the field. He's been there all day. Mark, what is the latest on what you're seeing out there in the field?
north of the studio on the 407 and the 401. Just pulled on to the 407, and I'm going to go over to Mississauga Road and head north just to see some, as I said, some of those smaller roads, to see how the plows are doing on those roads, because the main highways, very clear, lots of people, moving at a reasonable speed. I haven't seen anybody doing like 130 kilometers an hour or anything like that. But these roads are wet, especially when you're in the GTA itself. Because we didn't see as much of a transition, as much of staying with the snow. We saw more of that transition over to the rain. And as you can see in front of me, this is the 407 right now, just coming up to Mississauga Road, where I'm going to be getting off and then heading north just to see if there is a changeover. But I don't expect one at this point until likely as we get into Wednesday morning. The concern for me is that switchover. If there's a lot of rain that's pooled on the surfaces, and we do get that freeze up, or you get that drop, we could have a freeze up and lots of ice as we get into Wednesday morning. But Tyler, I'm gonna ask you about this one. Is like, how fast do we expect that freeze up? Will the plows and the snow crews have time to sort of deal with that before we do see that icing?
Yeah, so let's take a look at kind of where we expect the temperature, the freezing line to really move across southern Ontario, Mark. So the plows really want to get ahead before that low lifts north into northeastern Ontario, because by the time we get through Wednesday morning, Mark, we're expecting those temperatures to really fall back below the freezing mark, especially above the escarpment. So that is kind of my concern for Wednesday, with the snow returning to the traditional snow belts throughout the day on Wednesday, Mark. And the winds will be super blustery out of the west. We've got the computer models showing our viewers that the snow is really roaring Kincardine, Goderich, up and down the shores, the eastern shores of Lake Huron. But you know what? Most of that snowfall will miss the greater Toronto area. It'll remain above the escarpment. So Toronto, you're off the hook for now, but we are watching signs for that system late Friday into Saturday to be highly impactful, and with much less warm air surging north. A couple computer models in question are tracking that low a little bit further east, so we'll have to keep an eye on that one going forward here on out. So we're going to take a turn here and look at British Columbia. That has really been a province struggling with winter weather here as of late. We've got some decent footage from the province of BC here. This was one of the first low elevation snowfall events of the year. I think it's about the second one for inland sections of Vancouver Island. There is the city of Nanaimo, about an hour and a half ferry ride from Horseshoe Bay over towards the mainland. There is Surrey, BC, where we saw about 5 or 6 centimeters of wet, sloppy slush. Surrey getting in on that action. They're about 100 meters above sea level, and that made all the difference. YVR didn't report any significant accumulations, but inland, there you go. The city of Surrey reporting snow. These wind gusts have been holding steady over the past several hours, so we haven't really seen them exceed the threshold over the past few hours at this point, so we might have peaked in terms of the power outages. We'll keep an eye on that one. Last check, over the past hour or so, we had about 13,000 customers across southern Vancouver Island without power, a little bit less across northern Vancouver Island. This wasn't the focus with this windstorm. The winds and that low-level jet sweeping just south of Vancouver Island, and gusty westerly winds through the lower mainland as well have been a concern. The interior, it's not so much the wind and power outage threat, it is really the snowfall. So if we want to take a look at maybe some of those ski resorts, if you can get to them, the ski conditions will be absolutely spectacular, Matt, when we look at this absolutely pristine setup that will be unfolding across the province over the coming days and weeks.
Yeah, Tyler, and I have a quick question for you, and we're encouraging any questions for those watching our live stream. If you'd like Tyler or Mark to really drill down on something that you're curious about. But Tyler, I just want to step aside and show the 7-day forecast for Vancouver. We're looking at a daytime high forecasted on Friday, -5, and then -3 on Saturday. So some pretty remarkable cool temperatures for the city of Vancouver. And then as we look ahead into next week, we have more snowflakes. And again, that conversation of low elevation snow, perhaps something we're going to be continuing with. And Tyler, is this all kind of part and parcel of the polar vortex story that we're talking about, this chill we're feeling in parts of Western Canada?
Yeah, it is. Essentially, a lobe of the polar vortex descended from the higher latitudes of the Arctic. And what that's going to do, that is going to bring that cold air all the way to the coast of British Columbia by Thursday morning. So that Arctic front will make its way all the way to the coast Thursday morning and afternoon. And then as we push through Thursday, we are going to be dealing with very unseasonable temperatures. You look at temperatures 10 to 15 degrees below seasonal for the coast of BC. Notice that wind direction shift, Matt, Wednesday evening. We're already getting that Arctic outflow through the north coast Wednesday evening. And then Thursday, we're going to get that easterly flow developing in and around the Fraser River and southern Vancouver Island. So the feels like, or the wind chill, by Friday morning, Saturday morning will be in the mid-minus teens, even for some of these coastal communities around southwestern Vancouver Island. And we'll have to watch for low elevation snow. There's still a big divergence in model disagreement right now, but you saw in that 7-day Vancouver forecast, there is the risk of low elevation snow as early as Saturday, and even something called strait effect snow by Thursday, Friday, with that cold air moving over the warmer waters of the Strait of Georgia. That's strait effect snow. It's on the table this week.
Yeah, you know, Tyler, it's interesting weather storylines pretty much anywhere you look across the country. And after what was a sort of a slow start to winter, many wondering, hey, where is winter? We're leading up to the Christmas holiday. We were all kind of looking at, well, who's going to get a white Christmas? And so much of the country did not have that. But thanks to the polar vortex, the introduction of some much colder air, we have a much different story now. So, Tyler, you mentioned the influence of that polar vortex into British Columbia and Vancouver more specifically, but as of right now, it's going to be really the prairies feeling that cold. And just to go back to Thursday, and I like what Tyler highlighted a few moments ago, which is when we look to Friday, temperatures are even colder. But here's a look at really once the cold air starts to really settle in parts of Western Canada, more so into Alberta. When we take a look into Manitoba, we're going to be quite chilly, but for Thompson, minus 23 for a high on Thursday. That's only 3 degrees colder than normal for this time of year. The seasonal average of minus 20. And for Winnipeg, we're going to be seeing things kind of on par with what we would typically see this time of year. Although we will see some changes in that polar vortex that could steer colder than usual temperatures to many areas in the days or weeks ahead. But just talking about the cold weather in the prairies, we also have the snowfall story. Now, not seeing a ton, but of course there are some concerns just given the location of the snowfall along the Yellowhead Highway initially. As we head into Thursday, still some lingering snowfall in the prairies, but not much in the way of very moisture-laden systems that are going to bring a major winter storm, but still problematic. And of course, we're dealing with colder temperatures gradually kind of deepening their grip on this part of the country. And into our Wednesday, we do have, again, some snowfall concerns, up to 25 centimeters forecasted for parts of Manitoba. And really, just track along the Yellowhead Highway from Winnipeg to Saskatoon to Edmonton and beyond. We're seeing some fairly impressive snowfall totals there. So in terms of the prairie story, we do have that look ahead to the cold temperatures, but a bit of snowfall to combat in the short term. Now, Tyler, where would you like to take us off to next, my friend?
Well, you know, should I touch this question or not? There's been a question about the system on Friday and Saturday. I don't know, my producers might get a little upset with me talking about the system on Friday, Saturday with the uncertainty. But let's give it a crack. We've got the Canadian model here. So Thursday, you can notice that we're getting some colder air wrapping in behind our system on Wednesday. So Thursday, you're getting some more traditional bands of lake effect snow in the Great Lakes Basin. And then through the day on Friday, we know, we have high confidence, a strong Texas low is going to begin to sweep towards the northeast. Notice the precipitation type being all snow initially with this system Friday evening and overnight. This will be a longer duration, much longer duration snowfall event through the Greater Toronto area and southern Ontario. And you know, you see the barometric pressure of this low and you have to wonder, is there blizzard conditions baked into this type of a low pressure system, especially along exposed sections of the western end of Lake Ontario, for example. we're going to still continue to monitor where that rain snow line ultimately sets up. So right now we're looking at the Canadian computer model guidance. The European computer model puts the center of the low a little bit further north over towards Lake Huron. It deepens it at a little bit more intensity. It'll hook towards the northwest and give us more rain, more reminiscent of our current system. So that's where we kind of stand right now. It could be a significant snowstorm. Mark is just getting warmed up, apparently, driving around as the precipitation over the past hour or so has switched back to rain.
Yeah, Tyler, definitely. I mean, you know what? Like you and I can, nerd out about meteorology for hours. But one of the things that I always find so fascinating is the balance that that you have to have for these major snowfall events. Because if you've got these lows that are too cold, there just isn't that moisture. That's not packing a lot of moisture to really produce lots of snow. But if it's too far south, it's pulling too much warm air up, you get lots of moisture, but it comes as rain. And it's kind of what you're seeing, what I've been seeing all day long. Now, I am on the western edge of Brampton, going up, which road am I going up right now? Yeah, I'm going up Mississauga Road. There we go. So I'm going up Mississauga Road right now, and you can see the slowdown here is not because of the weather. It's more just because there's a lot of volume going up Mississauga Road. But you can see a little bit of snow, a little bit of slush on the roads, really not slowing anybody down to any great degree. But I think people are taking it a little bit seriously, being careful. And to be quite honest, I'm very pleased that we got this kind of system first to remind everybody that yes, winter is here. Winter, we are in the middle of winter. As warm as December was, and I believe it was one of the warmest months we've had, one of his Decembers we've had in years. We are still, in a country, in a part of the world that gets very, very cold. So I'm looking at that one coming next week, but it's the cold behind that also has me a bit concerned. I mean, once we get those winds off the lakes, I'm very busy because of lake effect, then the lows, then more lake effect. I'm not complaining, just saying.
Yeah, Mark, it is going to be a really busy week, potentially month for us here at the Weather Network. And yeah, thank you so much for your contribution this afternoon, showing us the scenes on the roadways. Seems like drivers are behaving themselves, taking things a little slower with those wet roadways in and around the Greater Toronto area. Now, Mark mentioned the strong winds, and that is really going to be a focal point for us over the next several hours, days, and potentially with that next Texas low Friday evening into Saturday. So I'm going to watch this easterly wind. If you've been walking in and around downtown Toronto, poor credit, down at the Burlington waterfront, you felt that east wind, and that wind direction is going to abruptly change. You see that low sweep to the north, entering parts of southern Quebec. This is our secondary wind component to the system. As that low pressure system lifts north, these wind gusts will be quite strong in the neighborhood of 60 to 80 kilometers an hour. But if you recall the precipitation type, we had snow wrapping in and around this. So this is really going to reduce the visibility and make for some locally poor driving conditions in and around the traditional snow belts. Not expecting those bands of snow to move through the GTA, but whoa, look at Niagara Falls and the eastern end of Lake Erie. That's going to be kicking up waves down towards Prince Edward County, east along the 401. Those winds are going to be screaming out of the southwest. So that will be a significant component with this system. And we have to pay attention to the winds in and around Quebec as well. They are forecast to be very strong as well. Just pull in a graphic here and we could take a look at the wind gusts. This may induce blizzard conditions up the St. Lawrence this evening and overnight. That is highly concerning aspect of our forecast. Eastern townships, that little bit of elevation there. A lot of computer model guidance is indicating wind gusts in excess of 100 kilometers an hour. There's Quebec City with the heavy wet snow wrapping up early Wednesday morning, gusting to 80 to 90 kilometers an hour as that strong low sweeps north. And now we're going to continue to look at some of the temperature trends across Canada the next several days. You can see where that polar vortex is right now, Matt, over the Northwest Territories. That cold air is beginning to ooze across the Canadian provinces as we speak.
Yeah, Tyler, in a moment, I want to bring us back to Montreal for a viewer question about just how bad it might get in Montreal tomorrow. But let's go, on a little bit of a temperature joyride across the country. Now, we mentioned with the polar vortex spilling out those frigid temperatures into Western Canada. But yes, parts of Eastern Canada will ultimately get in on the fun as well. So let's take a look at some 7-day forecasts. We already looked at Vancouver. We showed that, on Friday, -5, feeling like -10, remarkably cold temperatures for the city of Vancouver. Now, taking a look at Regina, for example, this is really helping to illustrate the frigid temperatures plunging down into parts of the prairies, and southern Saskatchewan in the mix for that as well. Now, for Toronto, we're also going to be seeing, like you highlighted, Tyler, some impactful weather as we look towards the weekend for much of Ontario, and now also those much cooler temperatures as we head into next week. So 2024 has arrived, and it's bringing the wintry weather at last, and really battling against the El Nino forces that have so far up until now kept it a pretty chill and relaxed winter. But for Montreal, we also have, of course, an interesting storyline into tomorrow as we see again that initial snowfall pivot to what looks like rain. But how are the temperatures going to look? Well, we do see that chill coming down as well. But Tyler, we have a viewer question for you. They want our meteorologist to answer. Is Montreal going to get hit hard tomorrow? What can you tell us about that, my friend?
Yeah, well, if I can just, edit the question, let's scratch out tomorrow. Let's say this evening. Really, this evening is the focus for the heavy snowfall in and around the Montreal region. So I've just switched out to a really high resolution computer model that'll take us through this evening. So like we mentioned earlier this live stream, those 3 to 5 centimeter snowfall hour rates will likely come to fruition across southern Quebec and Montreal. Now, there is some uncertainty with just when we'll switch over to the heavy rainfall. Current guidance suggests as we track through pre-dawn Wednesday, the temperatures will just nudge above the freezing mark. You saw that icon, the high of +5, and the rain showers in and around Montreal. They will be locally heavy at times, but as we transition from one primary threat, the heavy snow, you could be waking up Wednesday morning in and around the Montreal region with upwards of 20 centimeters of snowfall needed to shovel. So that is extremely significant. That would be the second biggest snowfall event of the entire season for Montreal. We'll recap your snowfall totals here. There it is, split the difference there. Montreal, you're between a 40 centimeter snowfest in Mont Tremblant down towards just a few centimeters for the southern sections of the eastern townships, and the winds. The winds will be the dominating factor. In fact, this classic track of a low pressure system has been known to disrupt power to over 100,000 residents across Quebec when you see winds A, this strong, and B, this widespread. So Montreal, you're in a little bit of a haven here on some of our computer models. We're projecting not as strong winds downtown Montreal. A lot of those stronger winds, Matt, will be forecast to be across the higher terrain. So, obviously not the best ski day up towards Mont Saint Anne, Quebec City, for example. Just wait till Thursday. Yeah, the air mass will be much more frigid, but at least it's more calm.
Yeah, and Tyler, speaking of those winds, the same system pushing some very significant wind gusts into the Maritimes tomorrow with a power outage risk there that we'll continue to unpack. But just to bring us back to Ontario for a moment, here's a look at that snowfall forecast. Now, for many areas, the snowfall has already flipped over to rain, and what snow we did see accumulate on the ground is already kind of getting eaten up by that rainfall, kind of disappearing on us, turning into that very pleasant slush that we all maybe don't love so much. Now, in a moment, we're going to bring in Mark Robinson, but here's a look at that rainfall. And again, the rainfall warnings are in effect in many areas, and I think our storm hunter, Mark Robinson, has already encountered that rainfall. Mark, how are the roads and how's the vibe in what you're seeing right now?
Oh, well, you know what you're talking about, that slush. Take a look on the roads right now. There it is. Now, I'm in the northwestern part of Brampton right now. You can literally see the urban to the right and the farmland to the left. That is basically as far west of the city as I can go without actually being back out into the farms themselves. And you can also get an idea, if you take a look at the car ahead of me, you can actually see a lot of snow on him, and then sort of beside him, you can see that area where cars don't drive. That's totally covered in snow. So there haven't been the plows up and down here. And this is one of the things I did want to highlight. It's so often what happens with these storms, the plows are working away and they can get the major routes, but they can't always get the side streets. And that sometimes takes a little while. Now, we don't have to worry about, with this storm, with people getting stuck in their driveways because a lot of this snow is quite slushy. Cars can handle that if you have your winter tires on. So hopefully at this point, your winter tires are on so that you don't have any trouble. And mine are on. I've actually been, it's handled the roads pretty well. Definitely not the kind of major impact that we can get with, say, 25 to 50 centimeters of snow, which has happened in southern Ontario before. But looking ahead, I think we're getting into that active period. If you remember our seasonal forecast, we did say December was likely to be warm, and then as we got into that second part of January, either staying warm or getting active. And I think we're into the getting active scenario with those two. We could choose either stay warm or get active. I'm loving the getting active, but maybe not everybody else is hoping for that the way I am.
Yeah, well, thanks so much, Mark. And I think you might have hit the nail on the head there. It kind of does seem like we're getting into that active part of the year. And this same system that Mark is tracking for us out there in southern Ontario, yes, it's pushing into Atlantic Canada, getting lots of viewer questions. And we appreciate all of you tuning into our live stream, asking your questions. We're doing our best to make sure you get the information that you need. But of course, a lot to cover here with all these interesting weather storylines happening across the country. Here's a look at some snowfall. And in a moment, we'll bring in our meteorologist, Tyler Hamilton, with answers to some questions. I know we have some folks in New Brunswick wondering what's the kind of precipitation mix we're getting. We even have some questions about snowfall types in Labrador. But of course, the biggest impact we're expecting is the potential power outage risk with these very strong wind gusts, which as we get into our Wednesday evening into Thursday, those winds are no longer an issue. But Tyler, questions pouring in about precipitation types and where and what we might be seeing in parts of Atlantic Canada. What do you have for us there?
Yeah, so this is a highly localized question. So this town, Adamsville, is about a 45-minute drive northwest of Moncton. So the question is, how much snow, rain, and ice pellets will Adamsville be getting with Wednesday and Friday? So I've just freshly built a little prediction here with using the Canadian guidance here. You can see where the axis of the highest ice pellets will be just north of you in Adamsville. We're forecasting a little bit more up towards Doketown and Miramichi. So there is not a lot of freezing rain in most of the computer models. So that is generally not a risk with this system. Now for your snowfall amounts, you're in that 10 to 15 centimeter range at this point for Adamsville. A little bit further north where those ice pellets and heavier snow will be, kind of on that line from Miramichi to Fredericton. That's where you'll push over that 20 centimeter bar. So still a lot more snow than what is in the forecast across sections of coastal Nova Scotia. And we've actually had a question as well about the snowfall forecast up towards Labrador. So we can see out towards Labrador, I'll just throw on some place names here on the fly. I love building maps live, of course. So this is kind of the snowfall outlook here for Labrador City, Happy Valley, Goose Bay, dealing with a little bit less in the way of snowfall there. You can see that sharp cutoff as you work your way to the coast, but Labrador City, you are on the cusp there of 30 plus centimeters of snowfall, much less as you work your way towards Labrador. So that is kind of your outlook in terms of the snowfall, but we are still concerned, Matt Hamill, about the winds that are going to be really rocking and rolling all across Atlantic Canada over the next 24 hours.
Yeah, you bet. And the party will get started in the Maritimes tomorrow, so ramping up that late morning, afternoon. Power outage risk is very high for much of Nova Scotia, all of Cape Breton there. Prince Edward Island, we do have those power outage concerns tomorrow. So again, something to think ahead and make those preparations. And even looking into parts of Newfoundland, of course, we have some power outage concerns there as well. Now, we took a look ahead at some 7-day forecasts across the country. Here's a look at the 7-day for Fredericton. So will we have some impactful impactful weather into the weekend. Well, we do have a 90% chance of snow in the forecast right now. And you'll notice that similar temperature pattern where we're seeing a dip in temperatures. And for Halifax, 8 degrees tomorrow, but we're going to be seeing things right around that 0 mark, maybe even below 0 as we head into next week. And here's a look at St. John's 7-day as well. Fairly active pattern by the looks of it. Some snow in the mix for our Thursday. And a big part of a lot of the cooler temperatures, the polar vortex. So our live stream now is gearing down to a close. We appreciate all of you who are with us posing your questions, and we did our best to get to every single one that came in. So please stay tuned for any future live streams we have here in our Storm Center coverage on the Weather Network. We're happy to answer any questions that you might have. I want to give a special shout out to Tyler Hamilton, our meteorologist on the call today, for answering your questions, doing a great job walking through all these big weather storylines. And Storm Hunter Mark Robinson, thank you as well for all your field coverage. It was our pleasure serving you this afternoon with all this weather information, and make sure to stay tuned to the Weather Network.